Um, Welcome to the next product news. Let's just go quickly through it. We have all the new crawlers finally. So besides the crawler Cheerio that we demoed last week, we already have the crawler and the crawler-puppeteer. The differences are quite simple. The crawler exposes a page function that works directly in the browser, while the crawler-puppeteer exposes a page function that works in the Node.js context. So there are just different ways to work for different scenarios. The crawler Cheerio obviously works in the Node.js context. Let's just look for a bit on the crawler. You can find it in library under Apify crawler. Apify crawler, you can try it. There is some basic documentation for now. I just wrote that yesterday. I'll be trying to complete it with more stuff, but since you already know how to work with most of that, it's just SDK features. You should be good to go. And there's really nothing that's new or that you wouldn't be used to already. So if you just try the actor, if my internet connection allows me, I'll just go back to this in the meantime. So it's not a one-to-one port of the original crawler that works with the Phantom.js browser. It's just a new way to work directly with the browser. It has some of the old features. We discarded some of the old features, so be sure to actually check what's available on the context. But since we want to phase out the legacy crawler, this is the way to do it now. So if you had any trouble or if you were trying to hack some things in the original crawler, just let me know. I think what is good about this new crawler is those two things, and that's the SDK features that are available directly in the browser. Well, that means that even though you have a page function that's running in Chrome in the browser context, you can actually use dataset push data, request queue, key value store, and some other stuff directly there, because we have a communication channel through Puppeteer that basically invokes the functions on Node side and takes in the arguments from the browser side. So we're not actually running SDK in the browser, we're just telling Puppeteer to send us the data. So instead of having to work around this, you can directly push data to a dataset from the browser. I think that's kind of cool. And it has a global store because from what I've heard in crawler, there were troubles with persisting data through page function invocations. That means that, let's say in the first invocation, you would save some data from an API call, and then you would want to use it in the next page function invocations, but there would be no reasonable way to do that. So you would usually just stick this to intercept request data or some other stuff, or you would use the user data with actor. So now I've added a global store. It's available on the context. It works like any map, so it has get and set functions and the list function and stuff like that. And you can just use that to persist data and get it from the store in the next page function invocation. There are differences between the crawler and the crawler-puppeteer, and that's due to the fact that in the crawler we're running in a browser context, and we are saving the data in the Node.js context. That just needs to be done because we are running in multiple parallel browsers. Anyway, back to the serializable data in the global store. Just make sure that in the crawler you're only saving JSON serializable data, because as I said before, we are sending the data from the browser to the Node context to save it, and then you are recalling it in the browser from the Node context. So we need to be able to serialize this data. We can't be sending functions and stuff like that over that. So make sure it's pure data. which brings me to the crawler-puppeteer, which is pretty much the same concept, but you don't get a page function that's in the browser. You get a page function that's in the node context. If you imagine actor, it's pretty much just a wrapped handle page function. So you get the page, which is already loaded. You get some other features on the context, like key value stores and stuff like that. But you have all the SDK features available there. If you just go context.apify, it's everything that you have in Apify, so you can use all of that. It also has a global store for your convenience. The difference is you can actually store any data here because we are not crossing the process boundary. We're not going from Node.js to browser and back to Node.js. We can keep the actual objects. We don't need to serialize them to JSON and then deserialize them again. So if you want to save a map or if you want to save some element handles from Puppeteer, you can do that. Yeah, that's about it for the crawlers. It would be great if you try to use them. This seems to have actually loaded, so I'll just create a task. I guess this is the preferred workflow, that you go to library and choose the crawler, then create a task out of it. It presents you again with this UI. This is just the example stuff that's put in there. This is actually a proof that it runs from Node and from browser, because this log is our SDK logging function. So this gets called from Node context, while this is a typical console log in the browser, and it gets called in the browser context. We actually merge the logs if you take this browser log option. So not only you can choose a debug log that will show the debug messages, but you can also tick or untick the browser log, which will prevent the console log from showing up in the logs. This is actually interesting in case because browsers and web pages sometimes just place a lot of unwanted information in the console. So if you just want to get rid of that, just untick browser log and you're golden. You can inject jQuery, inject underscore as you're used to. These are for downloading images, videos, style sheets. Preferably, you should have them unticked because it saves data. But if you need the images for screenshot or something like that, you can use that. Typical configuration, the same as Cheerio crawler. You can pass in some custom data. That's it. Yeah. So I'll be really happy if you would try it out, because I think that unlike the Cheerio crawler, which is very specific, this could be used for actual, projects, for the simple ones where you don't really need to do a lot of pre-processing or post-processing, or you really just need to crawl web pages and output into dataset. It works the same as the original crawler, so whatever you return from the page function actually gets saved to the dataset. If you don't want to do that. You can call skip output, etc., etc. And yeah, let me know if any comments, anything else that you want to add there.
And what about debugging? What can I use from the screenshots, HTML, just run
Yeah, sure. You can use the save snapshot function that's available in both of these. So I'm just going to go through Puppeteer, but yeah, on context, there's the save snapshot function that you can call, and it saves a snapshot screenshot and a snapshot HTML in the key value store. So, but there's an important thing about this. It's throttled. So you can only do it once in 2 seconds. So that's to prevent like somebody running 50 parallels and saving a screenshot on every page function invocation because he just forgot it somewhere there. So for debugging, use that. If you wanna develop it on the platform. If you want to develop it locally, there's actually a feature that's not documented yet, but you can type this in the page function, and when you run it in non-headless mode, which should be the default, so unless you provide some special environment variables, it should run in non-headless mode, it will actually launch the browser and stop in the browser on that debugger message. So you can go from there and you can inspect all the variables and everything. It actually works in a way that when the crawler reads the page function, it actually checks if there is a debugger message, and if it finds a debugger message, it automatically launches the DevTools along with the browser and runs the debugging protocol. So I think this is probably the best way to debug it locally, because you have the full browser, you have the debugger for both Node and for here. But I understand that for some of the simpler tasks, it doesn't make sense to clone the crawler and to run it locally. So maybe you just want to go through this and to actually get something from it's not a safe screenshot, sorry, it's a safe snapshot. You just do this wherever you need to debug, and it will dump the full HTML and the full and the screenshot of the page. Make sure that if you really want the screenshot to work, you should have the download media checked, because otherwise it's just, or download CSS, because otherwise it's just a mess and you don't really see what should have been there. So for debugging, download media and download CSS makes sense, but then for production runs, just turn it off. But be sure to test it, because sometimes you can break something when you skip the images or CSS, but most of the time it should be fine. And I want to integrate live view into this soon. I need to do a small iteration on live view where it would just show the current page when it's running with one parallel. And probably I would just add another tick box here that would say live view, and when you check it, it will limit the parallels to just one, but then you would see everything that's happening in the browser. But that's not ready yet. I need to get to that. So I guess, yeah, that's what you can do to debug those crawlers. Any other question, guys? Okay, so I'm just gonna hand this over to Kuba, who's gonna tell you about the new changes in Apify CLI.
So I want to introduce some Apify CLI new features, which is released in version in 0.3. So first of all, if you want to if you want to have the latest version of Apify CLI, you have to update it. You just call this command npm install apify latest. So after that you have the latest version. So the first change was that we simplified the Apify JSON. So we removed the attributes AD. So you can now commit the Apify JSON to Git, and another user can pull it and build it on our computer, and also push it to Apify, and it create the same version of actor on his account. So it will be great for some use cases. And the next change was that we simplified the environment variables. So you have to now use just the env attribute, where you put all your environment variables which you want to use. Yeah, and after that we move, for example, build tag and version to root of Apify JSON. So that's main changes there. The good thing that is that we automatically update the Apify JSON when you run the first command from Apify CLI. So for example, if you run the Apify run on your old actor on your local computer, it prints you a message that the Apify JSON will be updated to newest version. So you just hit enter, and it will be updated, then you should commit it to Git, and that's everything you have to do to update the Apify JSON. So yeah, and the next thing what we changed, that we add new commands to manage secrets, because now it's impossible to manage the secrets from Apify CLI. So we add there some commands how you can which then you can add secret and remove secret and put them to Apify. So for example, if you want to add some secret, you just call this command and it adds the secret to your local computer, and after that you have to just fill it to environment variables like that. So, and after you push this actor to Apify, it's automatically encrypt the environment variable and push it with the actor. So yeah, I think that's all changes in Apify CLI. So if you want to check some migration guide or something like that, you have to check the GitHub repo where is everything. Right. So yeah, and I think that's about it. And I can move to library, which will be present by Raja.
I'm going to present you two new features which we have in the library. So I open the library. So again. So both features are part of the actor detail page. The internet is slow again. I go to library and I open some actor. So I open some actor. So for example, this one. And the first feature is a tab called example run. So if in your actor, if you select some run to show to user, you can present him example of a public run. So you can see it's almost the same as in the app. You can see input, output, some log, some basic info. It's the same as in the app. And how to set the example run tab. You just open your actor, for example, this way. So you go to tab runs in the app. You open some run. I don't administrator. There should be actually a run. No, it's not. If there is a run, you open the run information and you copy the public run ID. Then you go to settings, to the publication section, and then you fill the public run ID here. You can also click to see the preview of the published run. And then when you save it, you can see it in the library. So it's the public run example. And let's look on the second feature. It's about the input schema. If you define input schema for your actor, you can also present it to your user in the library. So I open this up. If you define your input schema JSON file, automatically it will show input schema tab, which is kind of documentation of the input that user can use. And the goal is to help him to understand the parameters he can use or she can use for running the acts. It's the same data as you define in input schema JSON file, like the label, the description, what type is the parameter, and also there's an example in JSON that the user can directly copy paste it to the API. And if you still struggle how to define your input schema, I recommend you to check out our documentations. under actor, there is input schema. There is a nice article how to set up your input schema, so you can check it out if you haven't do before. So that's all from my side, and if you have any question, I will be happy to reply. So no questions. So thank you guys.